Thank you. It's a real honour and a pleasure to be here. 19 years ago, it gets, every time I come here, the number tots up. 19 years since I sat here at Trinity and All Saints, or TASC as we used to call it in the old days, where I did my undergraduate course. And it did have a big effect on where my career went after being here. I went on to do my postgraduate at Preston because it was one of the few places that did postgraduate journalism courses that converted your degree into something that employers in radio and TV were looking for at the time to give you the legal qualifications, the sort of thing you now do very well here on your postgrad course. So it all started for me when I was about 14 or 15 years old, and I had an English teacher at my school down in Suffolk who, as well as being our English teacher, she presented on the local radio station in Ipswich. And she used to do extra shifts there and earn a bit of money because, as we all know, teaching doesn't pay. So she was supplementing her salary doing that. And one evening she took us, her English class, down to the local radio station and got us to do a mock broadcast. And we did a go, somebody had a go reading the news, somebody had a go reading the weather. And she took me to one side afterwards and said, you know what, you've got a lovely voice for broadcasting. And a little light went off in my head thinking, that is something that I could probably do without making too much effort, speaking and reading, and that'll be fine. So my interest went from there really, and I started off doing some work for hospital radio initially. That's where I sort of got my first experience in radio. And then BBC local radio was growing at that time in the late 1980s. And so local radio, BBC Radio Suffolk, opened up in my hometown. And I sort of worked my way to get sort of meeting some people from there, offering to do stuff. And my initial start there was just answering the phones for free on a Saturday morning between 9 and 12 for the mid-morning programme. Obviously don't get paid for it, but it's your foot in the door, you get the experience. And that, in a way, helped me to get my place here at Trinity and All Saints, because there's a lot of competition for getting into here, and it probably still is, but back then there was a lot of competition for getting in here, and it's just sort of doing something. And I still say this to people now: if I was sat on an interview, and I had 6 young people in front of me looking for a job as a broadcast journalist starting out, you can tell what people are like in an interview. Of course you can, but what would swing it for me is what effort have you made in your own time up until that point to show me that you are serious and interested about doing this as a job or doing this as a career? What work experience have you gone and got yourself? Where have you worked for free? Have you been to hospital radio? Have you been to your local newspaper? You pick up the local newspaper. I only live a few miles away from here in Wetherby now. And we have the Wetherby News. It comes out once a week. It's not the world's best paper, but it has the local news in it. And if you look inside it, there's a couple of pages of little neighbourhood reporters reporting what's going on in their street and their district and their neighbourhood. And they probably do it for no money, but they probably tasked to write 200 words, 250 words a week on what's going on where they live. And if somebody came to me as a young person looking for a job in TV or radio or journalism or print journalism, and they'd made the effort to do that, that would impress me. That really would. I'd think, good on them. They've gone out, they've had a go, and they've got themselves published in a small way. And it's little things like that swing it. And so the efforts that I made as a sort of teenager got me in here and got me a place on the course. And they knew I'd done a little bit of broadcasting when I came here, and during your first year, at the end of your first year at Trinity at TASC then, you used to have to go and do work experience for a few weeks. And the person organising it here, I forget their name, but they were great. I owe them a great debt from that time, took me in and said, there's this organisation in Leeds called AA Roadwatch, and they do the traffic bulletins. They do the traffic bulletins for all the local radio stations in the northeast of England. And they had a base at the Arlington Business Centre in South Leeds. And it was the AA offices, as in the Automobile Association, not Alcoholics Anonymous. So it's the AA offices down in Leeds. And they had a little place off the side where there were 4 cupboards, which were studio broadcasting cupboards, where you went in and you read the traffic news for whichever local radio station you were assigned to do. And all the BBC local stations in the northeast of England took live traffic reports, you know, every half hour during peak times, every hour during the day. And so I was sent off to AA Roadwatch just as a work experience for a few days to see whether I liked it or not. And Mike, who ran that unit at the time, lived down in Cookridge, got on with him very well, did a few sort of shifts and trying to find out what was going on, and got the hang of it. And basically, it was all it was. It was just reading out the traffic news. But it got your voice on every single radio station across northeast England, and every single programme controller and station manager, you know, by osmosis, knew your name, because at the end of the bulletin you would say Danny Savage, AA Roadwatch, and it would be popping up in their heads every half an hour or hour when you were on shift. And so you got your voice around, you got your name around, people kind of knew who you are. You rang up I went on to work in BBC Radio York as a what do you call them, RPAs, and radio production assistants. And again, got my foot in the door because the guy running the station had heard me on doing the traffic news, knew I had an okay voice, he must know something about radio, get him in and it went from there. So my first year doing the work experience there ended up being a paid work experience for 6 weeks, and then after that got shifts working for the AA in Leeds on the local radio stations that fitted around my lectures. And you know, but it was an effort to do. You know, my shift at the AA Roadwatch on a Saturday morning regularly in my second and third year was a 6 a.m. start at the other side of Leeds. So at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'd get up, I'd walk down, I lived in Headingley then, in student digs, I'd have to go and get the 93 or 95, wherever it was, the first bus of the day, running from Cookridge through to South Leeds, and I'd be walking out the door at 5 to get my bus to work, as all my mates were coming home from the night before. And that was my sad life on a Friday night. But that's what I wanted to do. You know, I wanted to get on, I wanted to get a job. So I went, when I went to work for the AA, and those are the shifts, and occasionally I'd work early mornings as well. If I didn't have a lecture that didn't start till 11 in the morning, I'd go and do 6 till 10 at the business centre. And Mike, during my first year, who I worked with, would drive up and pick me up and give me a lift over, which was a lot easier. But otherwise, you were on the bus across Leeds to get to work. So it was good experience, and again, it was valuable for what I did. But I soon worked out during that 3 years of working there is that if I was serious about getting a job in broadcasting, I would have to qualify as a journalist. It was either that or going to be a disc jockey or a presenter or something like that, which, to be honest, you last for a few months or a few short years at any given station as a local radio jock, and then you've got to move on. You've got to find somewhere else, and it's you've got to move on all the time. So I realised that to qualify I needed to qualify as a journalist. Preston was doing the course, and then from Preston I did my postgrad year. Do you do shorthand here? Good. Shorthand is good. It is not the devil's own work. I promise you, I despair. If somebody comes to me as a trainee journalist and says they don't do shorthand, I'm worried for them. I'm not worried about, I don't sort of lose sleep over it, but I'm worried for them, because if you're in court or somewhere, you've got to get the shorthand down. And even if you only get to 80 words a minute, it's better than nothing. Okay, what do you have? What's the minimum you have to get to here now? Prince 100, yeah, good. Broadcast? 70, yeah. I mean, that should be fast enough for most things, for most quick quotes in court. So even though you might think shorthand is the bane of your life, please do it and take it seriously and keep going at it until you pass it. So, did Preston, went to BBC Local Radio, did a few years there, then went to BBC Regional TV to work for Look North in Leeds, and then thought, well, where am I going to go from there? You know, the trouble is in regional television, and I know there's a few people here that have worked in it, you know, if you want to get on in regional television, the problem is there's a load of older people who don't move on. They've got their nice cushy job and they don't want to go anywhere because they've got to their niche as a local TV reporter. They have a nice life in whichever city they're living in, and that's it. They have no desire to. Why move on? You know, you've got the best of both worlds. You've got an interesting job in telly and you can live where you want to live. And I realised that I needed to get past that, I needed to get round them and to get further up the ladder. And luckily, working for the BBC, there was a North of England bureau based in Leeds. And I started working for them at weekends, so I'd work Look North during the week, and I'd do extra shifts for the network desk on the weekend. And again, it's about putting in the effort and putting in the hours. I was a young married man at that point. I had a young son, and it wasn't the best thing that I was working 7 days a week. But it was to move on, and it worked out in time. A full-time job came up as a reporter with network news for BBC National News, based in Newcastle. I went to do that for a couple of years, and then the correspondence job came up in Leeds, and that's what I've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years. So that's my career progression. I've bored you with that enough. But I wouldn't, my job now is North of England Correspondent. I report for the 1, 6 and 10 o'clock news, national radio and online as well, when necessary. But to be honest, a lot of the time in the BBC, if I'm busy doing radio and TV, online will just take quotes from you and stuff like that. You won't actually have to physically write the online because you're very busy doing everything else, sorting out all the other outlets. I've made a short film. It's a couple of years old. And there may be 1 or 2 of you who've seen it before. I doubt it though. It was made. I was asked to go and do prize giving at my old school down in Ipswich. So you'll see the only one reference that you'll think, what's he going on about? Is I say to the camera, where you live, you have Look East. Up here, it's Look North, as I show them around the gallery. But it's a 6 or 7 minute film. It just tells you, it's what my daily lot is and the different sort of variety of stories that I do. I'm not a specialist. I'm not a specialist in education or anything like that. I do general news. And so it's about variety and covering different stories. So hopefully this will work. And this is what we're doing. I'll just talk a bit briefly off the back of it. Well, this is work, the BBC newsroom in Leeds, where I'm based. It's where also regional television programmes are based, radio as well, the editors and all the people that make TV and radio in this region happen. Now, down in Ipswich, of course, you have Look East as your local programme at 1:30 and 6:30 on BBC One. But here we have Look North, which is based in Leeds and covers programming for Yorkshire. This is the gallery where the programme comes from. But in reality, we spend very little of our time here in the office. Most of it is actually spent nowhere near here. It's out on the road, finding out what the story is and reporting on it. Now, from our base here in Leeds, we cover the whole of the north of England. So that means a lot of driving. We could be 3 or 4 hours away to actually get to a story. When we get there, we need one of these to broadcast with. This is a BBC satellite truck. The big dish folds up. It sends all the pictures and all our reports up to a satellite and back down to television centre in London. We couldn't really do our job without one of these. And that's why we sort of broadcast live from the field, if you like. So you see a reporter on the telly, they're live at a location, they're using one of those satellite trucks usually. But what about the reports that we pull together? Well, we need this. We spend hours in one of these. This is our edit van, and it's used for actually putting reports together. And what we do, once everything's been filmed, it's loaded onto the computer and our stories are edited. It takes us probably an hour or 2 hours to edit a piece for the 6 or 10 o'clock news on BBC One. You can see here we've got some pictures up from the visit of the Pope just last week. And this van has been at the scene of some of the biggest stories in British television history, stories that we've covered over the years. Yeah. Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Good evening. There are dramatic developments tonight in the hunt for Raoul Moat, the gunman who's been on the run in Northumberland for the last 7 days. Scores of armed police are right now surrounding a man in Rothbury they say fits Moat's description and are negotiating with him.
Just after 7 this evening, the hunt for Raoul Moat entered its final stage. Police sealed off the riverside area of Rothbury, quickly closing streets close to the town centre.
Move back in a line. Can everyone just please move back in a line for your own safety?
People living in the area were told to stay inside and lock their doors. It happened so quickly that dozens of Rothbury residents were left inside the exclusion zone, to the visible distress of some.
I gather your mum is in the exclusion zone, is she?
She's just rang, she's in tears, she can't get out of the house.
Why, the police are not letting her go out the house?
No, she's just had a marksman, told her to get in with a gun.
So a police marksman has gone to her house?
Yeah, she's trying to come out the front door, come up here, and my mum can't get out down there.
Right, you with me? You're okay. You're fine. Okay, just hang on to me.
Well, it's just gone 8 o'clock and Northumbria Police have just revealed that they are negotiating with a man who fits the description of Raoul Moat. And that negotiation is happening just round the corner from here in the Riverside area of Rothbury. One eyewitness told a BBC journalist that a man came out of the bushes by the riverbank in Rothbury and police arrived very quickly. He then goes on to say that he saw a man lying on the ground with a gun to his head. As the waters of the River Derwent recede, look what's being revealed. Cumbria's rivers are slowly giving up what they have taken. But despite the floodwaters dropping, there are still thousands of acres of submerged land here. And this is where the flood began. The headwaters of the River Derwent were surrounded by some of the most famous mountains in the Lake District here, including Scafell and Great Gable. The valley is also where this record-breaking rain gauge is located. More than 12 inches fell in 24 hours last week, and it was still falling today. Here in the high Pennines, the thick blanket of snow is untouched in most places. So keeping the remote communities out here connected to the outside world is a big task for the snowblowers, which are relentlessly cutting through the drifts. In their wake, white walls several feet high now line many roads. But here on the county boundary, the snowblowers from County Durham turn round and head back home, leaving the road into Cumbria covered in 3 foot of snow and totally impassable. In the sunny skies over Lincolnshire today, pilots from the Red Arrows were up early in pursuit of aerobatic perfection. Sometimes flying just 6 feet apart, this is their daily routine for months to come. Some of the moves have been seen before, but this certainly hasn't. Flight Lieutenant Kirsty Moore has flown combat missions in Iraq and trained other pilots, but now she is the first ever female Red Arrows pilot.
Just pull, easy, go.
A Lancaster bomber, dipping and weaving low over the Derwent Valley. These exclusive pictures from the bomb aimer's position show the approach to a dam which played an unusual part in World War II. Let's take a flight and let's have a look at your old training route. New Zealander Les Munro is the last surviving pilot from the raid. He was just 22 at the time.
I feel a great deal of pride in the fact that I took part in the dam raid itself and as a consequence trained on the Derwent water. We're actually taking and lining up those 2 towers as a main objective of our approach.
And today he was a guest of honour as the Battle of Britain memorial flight paid tribute to the other men on his mission. According to the Royal Mail, the average postman or woman covers just over 5.5 miles on their round. But some of them now say they're being pressured into walking faster to complete what they call unrealistic rounds. Many of us amble along at about 2.5 miles per hour, but postmen say they're having to walk this fast, 4 miles per hour, with a heavy bag, and they say it's too fast. But of course, it doesn't always go right for everyone. And I like the general news brief. I don't want to be a specialist. And why would you? Because some people, if something's a passion for you and you really like doing a subject, then great. But I'm interested in things outside of work which could become a specialism, but I don't really want to. And you have different. If you had a specialist, if you had a specialism, I wouldn't get that call to go and do the Raoul Moat story in Northumberland, or the call to do the shootings in the Lake District. There's been lots and lots of big stories here in the north of England, and I think
we live in an age still, and I honestly think this, that the media is London-centric still. There's still a bias towards London because that's where most of the editors are based. They live their lives down there. They have their outlook on life is from London. And I think it's really important that we have a good, solid journalism course in the north, because there is an immense amount of stories in the north of England that can be covered. We have a Scotland bureau, we have a Wales bureau, but we need, north of England is a huge area where many millions of people live, and there's lots of important stories here. It's a great patch. So I don't know where you guys want to work when you graduate, but the north of England, don't look down on the north of England if you're not from this part of the world originally. Be open to it, because I think there's a lot of good stories that come out, a lot of interesting stories that come out of here. Just on the editing, you all laughed at the Geordie police officer. It just shows the importance of what I would call it ups-off. Yes, yeah. I mean, there's different terms for it, but sound in a TV or radio piece, let that sound come up. It's not about your voice. It's about what the real people are saying, what the atmosphere is. You can really capture the mood of something with a little bit of up sound. You don't have to introduce the person, just let the listener or viewer hear them or see them, and then carry on with your track. So if you're editing pieces together, I'm sure Richard has probably lectured you about this if you're on his course, but use up sound, use sound as much as you can, because that's what makes it makes an ordinary TV or radio piece sing and just be a lot better than it could be. This has revolutionised modern news gathering. You've probably done lots on it. I'm not going to go on about it, but these are fantastic for gathering audio and for gathering pictures. There was a flood story I was doing last year now. It's the day that Newcastle flooded. There was a torrential thunderstorm, a Thursday afternoon, and large parts of the city were flooded. I was sent up from Leeds to cover the story, and got to Washington, and couldn't get much further. All the roads were closed. I couldn't get to a camera crew. There was none that could come up from the south. So what do you do? Now, I filmed my piece to camera on this, and I got to a bridge. It was an underpass basically, and it was completely flooded with a van floating about in it. The picture was great. Couldn't get through it, couldn't get past it, but no cameraman or anything. But I had this, and there was a few people stood around. And I sort of picked on a reasonable looking person who happened to be a student. And I said, do you know how to use one of these? And he went, yeah, I think so. I said, right, this is what I want you to do. I want you to film my piece to camera for the piece. And I said, I'm going to say this, I want you to do that and move like that. And he went, yeah, all right then. So we had a couple of goes at it, and he did a really good job. And that was my piece to camera for the piece on the 10 o'clock news that night, because the other crews from Newcastle could go out and gather pictures and get them back to base, but I couldn't get there and they couldn't get to me, so how are we going to do it? So you just have to think around it slightly and think, well, how are we going to actually make it look as though we've been here and we're doing the story? And so all the pictures were fed out of BBC Newcastle down to London. I recorded the piece to camera on there, sent it in over 3G. It was in London within minutes. They were happy with it, and they used it as the piece to camera in the package. And I sent the student 30 quid for his troubles, and he was delighted. So, it was a win-win situation for everybody involved. Let's have a look. What else do you want to talk about? I mean, we're lucky, we're really lucky in the BBC, and we don't underestimate it, but we share a helicopter with ITN, a news helicopter. So whichever pictures we get from the air, we share with ITN. You might hear lots about great rivalry between news organisations, but we do look out for each other when we're in sort of sticky situations. I know during the Rothbury thing, when Raoul Moat announced that he wanted to shoot journalists because the Sun published an article about the size of his manhood or something, which upset him. So he decided that the Sun said he'd been taking too many steroids, or one of the red tops accused him of doing something which upset him, and then he announced that he was wanting to target journalists, not just police officers. You look out for your colleagues from ITN and Channel 4 and other people. That you are friends. Actually, of course, you want to do better than the people you are working against, but at the same time you look out for each other. So the helicopter, we share the helicopter. So you saw on the Lancaster piece there, we just had the BBC News helicopter sort of up overhead, and that got those beautiful pictures from that fly past. And then at the same time, when we did the floods piece, they send the helicopter up to Carlisle Airport, and we go off into the Lake District with a helicopter, and sort of get that, you know, flood stories are great for looking down on and seeing the extent of flooding, which you can't necessarily see from a shot on the ground. Again, but you use it sparingly. It's expensive. You know, when I went up, I met the helicopter at Carlisle Airport, and I think they had 1.5 hours of flying time left for that day. So by the time we've been into the Lake District and done our filming, with the pilot saying to me, "We're not going any further, it's too windy." All right, then fine, I'll bow to his professional knowledge. So we did our piece to camera where we were, and then flew back down the valley. And we were going to do a live from the helicopter into the 1 o'clock news on BBC One. But it was 40 minutes away, so the helicopter had to sit down in a field for half an hour before we went up again to, you know, it's something, we just don't fly around burning license fee payers fuel for the fun of it. It has to be done sparingly, and it has to be thought about. I know somebody's planted an idea in my mind earlier on saying, yes, but how many stories that you do for BBC National News are exclusives? Now, I'll be honest, not a lot of them are exclusives. And if you're going into the world of journalism to do exclusive stories, then good luck to you. You will have a lovely time. You will get on about twice a year, and you will spend the rest of your time bashing the phones. You know, it's a great thing to do an exclusive story, but the reality of doing daily television news, as I'm sure those that have been in it, is that you have not got time to sit there and ponder about a story for days on end. Because if you turned around to your editor and said, "Well, you haven't been on screen for the last 2 weeks, what have you been doing?" "Well, I've been following up a story which hasn't made because it didn't stand up," you're not going to be thanked for it. So if you want to do exclusive stories, I would suggest leaning towards the documentary programs and the investigation units that do that sort of thing for a living. But day-to-day news is often not about exclusives, it is about reacting to events. And the skill in broadcast news is to keep up with those events once they keep happening. Because it's rather embarrassing if you're doing a story and then ITN or Channel 4 are ahead of you. And I'm sure it's the same if the BBC are ahead of ITN, that they would get sort of a flea in their ear from their editors. So the skill is keeping up with stuff as you go along and finding out the new lines as the story develops. One of the ones that sticks in my mind the most is a quite famous story from a few years ago now. You may or may not remember it. It was the front page of the Saturday Mirror one day, and it was a big front page splash of a story of an Iraqi detainee apparently being urinated on by a British soldier. Remember the story? And it named the regiment, it accused the British soldiers of being involved, of being sort of mistreating Iraqi prisoners, of war. Started to cause a big stir in the Middle East. The regiment was based in the north of England. We went to investigate on the Saturday. I was the on-duty weekend reporter. We went up there to talk to them and got talking to somebody who was quite close to the regiment. And he says, "I don't think these pictures are genuine." And I said, "Well, why?" And he goes, "The stitching on the inside of the lorry isn't right." Now, how un-Iraqi is that? So I thought, I'm not sure. So I said, "Look, if you can prove that, if you can really stand up that line, will you give me a call?" And he said, sure, no problem. That evening, he rang me at home and he said, I can guarantee those pictures are fake. They are not real. And because the uniforms are wrong, the lorry is wrong, the location is wrong, it just doesn't stack up. Those are not real photos of British soldiers mistreating Iraqi prisoners. And we got that story on first and got a good kicking in the mirror the following couple of days because the BBC was daring to question their story. Of course, that story proved to be, our lead on that, proved to be absolutely right. And in the end, Piers Morgan, the then editor of the Mirror, had to resign from his position because of the furore over that story. So you get a big story, you report the facts, you make sure you attribute those facts to whoever's saying it, because obviously, you'd have to use wording like the Mirror claims to show pictures of British soldiers mistreating Iraqi prisoners. But then you should question the facts all the time. Does it stack up? Is it right? Can you prove that it's right? Can you find some extra facts to back up their story or even to contradict their story? So that is the skill in broadcasting. It's not necessarily about exclusives. It's nice to get them, but you know, you get involved in a story that's breaking, and and an exclusive can grow from it because of what you find out, and you could then be ahead of the curve on it. So that's what I'd say about that. Best part of advice: you don't find many stories sat at a desk staring at a computer. Get out and talk to people as much as you can. Okay? To me, I often feel that a day in the office is a day wasted if there's nothing particular. I could be in the office for a reason, to do some planning, or to write something up, or to follow up on a story from the day before. Like last night, I did it's a very featured piece, but I went up to Kielder Water in Northumberland to do a piece about the national park up there are bidding for what they call dark sky status to get some international award that says they're fantastic for stargazing. So we went up to the observatory at Kielder, a fantastic place up in the middle of nowhere, did some filming there, great evenings filming, got back at 1 o'clock this morning, went into the office this morning to actually write that story up, and that'll go out on Breakfast News next week. And it'll make a really nice picture feature about something that's sort of, you know, a good issue in the north of England. There'll be nice pictures. It will go out on Breakfast News next Tuesday or Wednesday, run on the news channel during the day, might make the 1 o'clock news at lunchtime, and that'll be it. But you know, I'm in the office kind of following that up. But if you don't, you get out and talk to people. You know, you've got contacts, ring them up, ask them how they're doing, ask if they know anything new. You know, you're not being a pushy journalist, you're just keeping in touch with people. And people soon spot if you're being a pushy journalist and you're just tapping them up for a story. And you know, they won't give you anything. But you know, stay on friendly terms with people and they come to you. Another one I did was the guy called Paul Moore. We've heard a lot about whistleblowers recently. You know what a whistleblower is? Yeah, somebody who speaks out against their employer, perhaps if they're paid, if they signed an agreement not to. And a friend of mine, Paul Moore, was the head of risk management at one of the big banks, and he decided he'd taken a severance package from them but wasn't happy with the way the banking was going. It was the height of the banking crisis. He talked to me a lot and then decided that he wanted to blow the whistle on what had been going on in the big bank that he worked in, and that made a panorama. Now, I wasn't involved in that panorama. That was almost a story that came to me which was too big to do a 2-minute piece on the 6 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news. But you pass him on to somebody else. And that's the good thing about the BBC, is that there's a wider organisation that you think, you know, that's a good story for them, that won't make for me. And you know, other stories come my way that I think, well, you know, that'll make a good guest for Victoria Derbyshire on 5 Live or Bacon or something like that. You know, pass stories on to other people if it doesn't make for you, because it's if you do a favour for somebody and pass a story on for them, they're going to remember you for it and they'll pass something back to you in due course. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about my work, and so I'll move on to the slightly more important thing of why I'm here today. The Centre of Journalism here, as you probably know, is launching an Alumni Association. Sort of hopefully the idea is to tie in you guys, undergraduates and students in postgrad courses, with people that perhaps left Trinity in the last few years or who are working in the news organisations sort of a few years further on. Not necessarily somebody like me who's sort of 17 or 18 years down the path, but people who are maybe 2 or 3 years down the path from you guys that have been there and know the pitfalls. And I think it's a great idea because there was nothing like this existed when I was a student. I was really lucky when I got into the BBC to my role as a North of England correspondent, because I came in and learnt from 3 guys who were near to retirement. So there was absolutely no problem with them teaching me the ropes, teaching me the tricks, gently joshing me if I got something wrong. One of them used to have a go at me for overwriting. You know, it's easy to overwrite stuff for radio and television. You know, script is too long. And he would nudge me about it and say, right, say that instead. And it taught me a brilliant sort of valuable skill to sort of boil down what you're trying to say rather than use too many words, as you will inevitably do when you start out. You'll write too much. I'm sure on your first news exercise, you know, there's reams of the stuff and you've got to boil it down to a 30 or 40 second voice piece. So I was dead lucky. I had people that were moving on from working in the organisation and were happy to train me. You may not be so lucky, because you might go into a place where you're learning from people who are 5 or 6 years down the road from you, who may see you as a threat, and they don't want you to get on because you might be nicking their job. And I think it's really important that we have this sort of tie-in with past students. You know, people that have come up for a similar route from you and who can just give you a bit of gentle guidance and a bit of advice, some wisdom, if you like, of what to look out for and what perhaps to do and what to think about. And I talk to quite a few of my younger colleagues at work. They'll come to me for a chat sometimes. Not I'm the old man of the newsroom or anything, but they'll come to me and they'll go, what do you think about this? Or I'm thinking about going for this job, should I? And you know, I'll give them honest advice, and that's all you can do. But it's, you know, it's honest, impartial advice, knowing that it's not from somebody so close to you that, you know, it could affect my career or your career if you know, if we were sort of too close together in a working environment. We're nicely detached from each other, you as students and past Trinity students there in the workplace that can just give you a steer. And I think it's a really good thing to do that's been launched today. I know the college has got some funding for this, I won't go on about it, but again, it's great that they have, that it's just going to help you guys move on and ask people questions, because of course you can ask your staff here questions, your lecturers. They've all worked in the business, they know exactly what the deal is. But you know, it's also handy to talk to people that are doing it full time still and know exactly what's going on through different organisations. We'd have a mentoring scheme now in the BBC, and it works quite well. But it's a fairly recent event, as far to my mind anyway, that I've only seen about it recently in the last few years. And it works, and it does a lot of good for lots of people in the organisation. So I think it's great that we're having this alumni tie-in with past students here, hopefully to help you guys in the future. And all I can say is kind of make the most of it, because you know, you may get some invaluable, impartial advice from people who are just a few steps ahead of you down the road. Thank you very much. If you've got any questions, do shout or come and talk to me afterwards. Okay?